Osley and I have kind of already gone, but for people that don't know, my name's Kathleen. I'm a Grizzly Corps member, which is a new AmeriCorps program serving at Trinity County RCD. And my main project is this Community Forest Strategic Plan update.
Yeah, and my name is Osley. Osley Welsh. I also go by Oz, which you may hear sometimes. And I'm the Forest Health Program Manager here at the Trinity County RCD, and working with Kathleen to draft up the strategic plan. And my background is in forestry, so that's me.
Next on my list is Pat.
Oh, so I'm Pat Frost. I'm not really with any organization on this. I guess I'm disorganized. But I've been on the steering committee for since the beginning. And Kathleen, at least I'm having a little bit of trouble with your volume.
Oh, okay.
I hear you all the time.
Yeah, I have a new setup, so I'll try to speak up. Thanks for letting me know. I have a 619-358 number calling in.
Yeah, good morning. It's Miller Bailey.
Hey, Miller. Could you just say who you're with and why you're here briefly too?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry for my tardiness. Miller Bailey with the Watershed Center, co-director of fire management. Tied in with this group, we have a lot of projects that butt up against the community forest. So we're tied in there, and then starting to really kind of put a prescribed fire footprint opportunity into the WCF. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Miller. Then I have a 530-913 number.
Yeah, this is Dylan Sheedy, Forestry and Fuels Program Director at the Watershed Research and Training Center. Here because I care about the Weaverville Community Forest, and we have a lot of projects there, and looking forward to hearing some of your guys' ideas.
Great, thanks for being here, Dylan. Next I've got Alan Siegmiller.
Hi, Alan Siegmiller. I volunteer with Trinity Trail Alliance and just a community member.
All right, then we have Alden Neal.
Hi, good morning. Alden Neal. I'm an assistant field manager for the Reading Field Office. I'm covering for Jen this month because she's on vacation. So I'm here to take notes and to hopefully answer any questions that you have.
That's BLM?
Yeah, Reading BLM.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Alden. Then I've got Charlie Holthouse.
There we go. Hi guys, I'm Charlie Holthouse. I'm the timber tax forester for the state of California for the local area. Community member, registered professional forester. Just wanting to do what I can to help out.
Thanks, Charlie. Let's see, Chris Cole.
I'm Chris Cole. I'm the Forest Health Project Coordinator for the Trinity County RCD. We also have lots of projects and programs within the community forest, and just interested to hear what you guys are working on.
Thanks for coming, Chris. Then I've got Colleen O'Sullivan.
Hi, Colleen, Resource Conservation District Board member and Steering Committee member.
All right, thanks, Colleen. And I have Cindy Childress.
Hello, I'm the secretary for the Nuril-Mekwintu tribe, and we met with Oz for the last couple of years regarding your guys's community forest. And so we're just here to help collaborate to protect all of our cultural and natural resources. And so we're really proud to be here.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you. Thanks for coming, Cindy. Let's see, Denise Wesley.
Hi, I'm Denise Wesley. I'm the GIS manager for the Trinity County Resource Conservation District. And I'm here today to support the efforts of the RCD while I do GIS work from my home office. Nice to meet you all.
I think next I have Jerry Cousins.
Hi there. I'm not with any organization, although I'm a collaborative member. I've not attended these before, and I just wanted to kind of hear what you're doing. I will have to log off at around 2 o'clock for another gathering. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Jerry. Jill Cox.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Cox. I am the District 2 Supervisor-elect and part of the steering committee by invitation. Very excited about that. So where appointments are concerned, I certainly have expressed my desire to be a part of all things forestry related, emergency services, but those appointments are yet to be seen by Supervisor Brown. So hopefully I get to remain and stay connected with all of you on these projects. I'm really grateful to all of you for what you're doing. Appreciate your time, your commitment, and your expertise.
Thanks so much, Jill. Next I have Karen A.
Hello, I'm a new Weaverville resident, and I'm interested in anything to do with forest, rivers, and trails.
Awesome. Welcome to Weaverville, Karen.
Thank you.
Kenneth Baldwin.
Yeah. I'm a forester with VVW and Associates. I've been involved with the community forest before it was a community forest, and I'm on the steering committee, and I'm still involved and quite interested in the forest.
Thanks, Kenneth. Keith at SPI.
Hi there, Keith Greenwood, Sierra Pacific Industries, Weaverville District Manager, and actually I came by invite from Bob Morris a while back. We got to talking about the community forest, and I asked a question, and that got me on. So I have interest primarily because we surround it, and it is, I think it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate what our objectives are with regard to forest management and fire protection. And so if we can do a good job of demonstrating that we can do something and it's effective, then I want to be a part of that.
Yeah, we appreciate having you, Keith. I don't see Bob Morris yet. Maybe he'll join us later. Ricky.
Hi, I'm Ricky Stummy. I'm a forest advisor with UC Extension. I'm based out of Reading, but I cover Trinity County as well.
Okay, I see an Amanda.
Hi, yeah. It took me a while to log on because I don't have very good internet service. It literally took me 20 minutes to log into the Facebook page.
Oh, sorry. Well, we're happy to have you. Do you want to just say briefly why you're here and if you're with any associated organization? Well, maybe internet troubles. Well, we're happy to have you. And I think my last person is a 530-913-082 number.
This is Dylan Sheedy from the Watershed Center.
Oh, I thought I had renamed you. Okay, I think that is everyone. If I missed someone, please feel free to say hello. But otherwise, we can get started. Okay, So yeah, hopefully everyone got my agenda yesterday and was able to take a look at our strategic plan draft if you felt so compelled. So kind of just as a progress update from Ozalie and I, we have been working real hard on getting information in the draft this past week and a half or so. And we're learning a lot as we go through the process. Finding we're definitely going to need specific help with areas that may not be our expertise. So I've been speaking internally a lot recently with Maria Flights, our watershed program manager. And we'll be doing a lot of internal conversations at the RCD to gather the specific knowledge we need to talk about future project categories and needs of the forest, but we would like to get that from you all as well. So if you have specific help knowledge to offer on any of the topics we're discussing today, or just in general, you can always interact on the Google document draft or reach out to me or Ozalie. I think hopefully everybody has our contact info at this point if you're here. So yeah, that's first update. Generally, we are focusing a lot of effort on getting specific information into our kind of proposed family of actions to accomplish all of our objectives. So we're just trying to start thinking more about what categories of projects will look like in the future on the WCF, and how specific or general to be about discussing them in the strategic plan. And you may have noticed, if you did get a chance to take a look at the Google document draft, we still need to draft a lot of kind of the front matter information, just what is the WCF, where is it, what's in it. We were really trying to focus on getting the forest management objective info started to start having that conversation with you all this month. But I think that's something we'll be focusing on throughout December and the beginning of January to have better completed for our next meeting.
Oh, Kathleen, this is
Yes.
Pat. So, you know, I've been working on a chapter for a book on community forestry that has a lot of that background information, and I'd be happy just to share that draft with you guys, and you can just plagiarize, steal pieces that you need wherever
awesome.
they fit, whether location or history or whatever. That might save you some work.
Yeah, that would definitely be helpful. And we can accredit you for that.
Yes, and we have what you helped write. I think you and Colleen and maybe Alex Cousins helped write for this book. We have that as well, which is we need to just pull information out of, but the more the merrier. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
Oh, you're muted there, Pat. Pat, I think you were muted while you were just talking.
So that's good, but it's a little dated as far as acreages and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And just generally, this is a great example. So thanks for chiming in, Pat. But you know, we're all here because this is a collaborative document effort, collaborative community forest. So anytime anybody has something to share, say, ask, please absolutely feel free to do so. And next, I just wanted to leave a little bit of quick space on the agenda for any initial questions or feedback or thoughts people have. We're gonna get, you know, into nitty gritty here shortly, but if anybody has just any burning question for Ozalie or I or the group. All right, hearing nothing, we can keep on going. We wanted to also leave space for some outstanding discussion items that we didn't really get to last month. but we're already coming close on 1:30 here, so I also want to be aware of the time that we have today. So I think maybe we'll just talk about the first two. And again, if it seems like it's too much of a conversation, this can be tabled for a later, more relevant meeting. But we've been trying to think about how action items and kind of families of projects should be prioritized and ranked in the document. So again, if you had a chance to look through, we're trying to do a lot of description of potential actions that will happen in the WCF as project categories. And so we're just trying to think about how to decide what needs to come first or areas that really need treatment. So we just wanted to see if anybody had thoughts on that yet.
Hey, Kathleen, it's Colleen.
Hey, Colleen.
Well, could you repeat that question?
Yeah, Azalee and I have been brainstorming about how to rank potential project categories. I don't want to say specific projects because we're not trying to prescribe specific projects at this point. But just thinking about, are we going to prioritize a harvest or a stream enhancement project? And we want to do both of those, but do we think that one needs to come first, or one is more urgent, or we know that there's a specific area or a general area that needs to be prioritized for treatment? So just wondering if people have any thoughts on like tackling a to-do list.
I think in general, in a strategic plan, I don't know if it's really important enough to prioritize anything, but because you've narrowed down the basic subject matter to a few items. So maybe your question about if someone else has got their someone else is unmuted. I can hear somebody else. Anyway, if you can hear me, my point is that I'm sure within the community forest there are areas that probably need attention, or I would say forest management, and that can be a subset of just a general forest health. But I don't know if ranking is really important at this point. And as I said in one of my comments today, is I would say that recreation and education might be right up there with forest health, because it is I think the main way that most people experience a community forest and learn about it and have opportunities to learn about it. So that's my input on that.
Kathleen, this is Rick, and I certainly appreciate Colleen's comments on that, and I think she brings up a lot of good points. One thought I had might be to look over the objectives and implementation goals and use those kind of in a matrix, if you will, so that you can list out, the different goals: road access, fire resistance or resilience, recreation access, recreation quality, and put it together in a matrix so that you can not rank projects, but you can see how the project impacts each of those objectives. In my mind, the document and this committee would contribute towards defining what those categories are, and then on a project by project basis, as things happen down the line, they can be used to fill out that matrix.
Yeah, I think, thanks Ricky and Colleen. I think what we're looking for is, that kind of input on how the process should go of determining, because it's a strategic plan. So I think part of strategy is figuring out which actions come first, which actions are the highest priority over the next 8 years. So that kind of input about like, oh, it should be a sort of quantitative process where they're ranked like a CWCP, or it should just be us talking it out and then coming to consensus. Like, I think those are very different models, just the two that I just mentioned. And so I think that also I'm thinking, as we talk about it right now, that maybe this will become clearer and people will have more thoughts about this once we've defined some of those actions a little bit more. So maybe we can table this conversation for 1 or 2 meetings from now, or even towards the end of this multi-month process, so that we actually have the actions in front of us and we can look at, oh, this is what a harvest looks like, this is what a stream flow enhancement looks like, or whatever it is, and then really think about our priorities once that's all laid out in front of us. So that would be my thought at this point on that.
This is Colleen again. Thanks, Ricky, for your comments. I also thought yours were excellent. So we've got a little mutual admiration society going here, which is great. I guess what occurred to me as you all were talking was we have priorities within our major strategic areas, but as far as prioritizing the main areas, that's not as important. And I really like the matrix idea, because I think something that is kind of lacking maybe, because we just haven't thought about it like this, is that there are so many different things either in the hopper or being implemented or being proposed, that maybe a matrix would really show all of that and the gaps, so that we could actually think about future projects more strategically. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, just have it all.
Yeah, yeah, thanks, Colleen. And to clarify, yeah, I don't think we would ever pit forest management against education, against recreation. I think that's not productive, because those are all such central objectives. So yeah, I don't think Kathleen or I intended that at all. And so it would be within each of those. So if you look toward the end of the document where we've kind of started the scaffolding for that process that we haven't fully fleshed out yet, it's separated by those 3 objectives. So we're just comparing forest management projects against one another, comparing education projects against one another, or not even projects, but just project types, and then recreation project types against one another. So yes, I think we're all on the same page there. And I think we can come back to this, like I said, once we have fleshed out those actions a little bit more. So yeah, thank you all for your input.
Could I put my oar in here?
Yeah, of course.
Kind of. From my viewpoint, preventing or reducing the chance of the community forest burning up should be a high priority, because all these other things, recreation, education, they're going to be severely affected if you get a catastrophic fire going through this forest. And the Forest Service has done a lot to reduce that possibility, but I think on the BLM portion, there's still some areas that might be problematic, and I think those should be looked at. I don't know if the RCD, I think they had a project plan to do reduce fuels around the Trinity, what's that subdivision called? Up there, up Mill Street.
Oh,
Timber Ridge?
Timber Ridge.
Timber Ridge, yeah.
Timber Ridge, yes, that's it, Timber Ridge. I think Chris Cole contacted me about that, and I don't know whether that ever occurred, but that was something that we looked at a long time ago, reducing the fuels around that particular place, because they only have one way in and out. So, you know, I think there are areas that certainly could be treated, particularly on BLM, and I think those should be a priority.
Those projects, Kenneth, were specifically on private land. We did like a shared field break on there's like 3 sort of surrounding private pieces of property around that, the western, southern, and eastern portion of that subdivision. And so we did shaded field break work in those larger pieces, and then we've also have had some more recent projects doing, you know, more defensible space and roadside work within the subdivision itself. But we've, you know, as far as that's concerned, we haven't actually done work on the community forest side of it within the bounds of the federal land there, the BLM land. Besides that phase 2 portion, that's kind of more at the bottom end of it, which I think is on the northern portion of that subdivision.
Yeah.
But that has been a long, you know, that was 10 plus years ago.
Hey, this is Alden from BLM. So we do have some new NEPA mechanisms that we can use. We have a statewide programmatic EA for fuels reduction along infrastructure. So this has really allowed us to kind of pick up our fuels reduction. We have a project up by Lewiston. We have one, we had one down in Butte County. So we're kind of picking up the pace on the fuels reduction. So if we got some really good, that would be really helpful if we kind of had these locations identified. We could start moving on putting together a project to get into the community forest and start doing some fuels reduction along infrastructure, 200 feet. But I mean, that still buys you if you have a start off of a road. Forest firefighters can get in there quicker and potentially catch it before it becomes a super big incident. So
that's great, Alden. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Alden, this is Colleen. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if anyone knew that until just now, but that's pretty wonderful tool to have. I will just throw out as another project is the Democrat Gulch Road access, which goes right through the BLM part of the community forest and accesses private properties in Democrat Gulch, but then the forest extends beyond that. And those folks have been wanting for years to do fuels reduction along the road and would love the assistance. So there's a whole group of people that are already organized to participate in that. So thank you so much for sharing that.
No problem. I'll pass it on to our fire management officer, Rob Winkler, who's been has been working a lot with the Trinity County RCD. So I think we're going to start picking stuff up. So I'll let him know.
Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, if anybody has anything else to add on prioritization process, I think we can move on. But I think that is a kind of the tip of the iceberg of what we mean talking about the types of projects. So like Kenneth mentioned, to him, fuel reduction and fire resiliency seems like a #1 priority. So that's what we would want to think about in this prioritization process is if that's a consensus agreement, then let's put fire resilience projects at the top of the list, or treatments at least. And we can talk, throughout the next several weeks and months about how to make up that matrix and figure out how to most effectively have that prioritization discussion. All right, and kind of on a similar note, and hopefully a quick question, if there are any low-hanging or fingers crossed cheap treatment actions that people can think of off the top of your head that we may not have talked about yet in our strategic plan outline, or that people think could be implemented within the near future of our 8-year timeline. All right.
Hey, Kathleen, Colleen again, once again, can you repeat that?
Sorry, Colleen.
Zoning out on Zoom.
Yeah, are other people having issues with my volume?
No, I'm not having an issue. I just zoned out. Please.
Oh, no, it's okay. Just someone else brought up earlier that my volume might be a problem. I have a different microphone this week. So Colleen, I was just saying if anybody has ideas for low-hanging, hopefully cheap or easily accessible project ideas that we definitely need to include in the strategic plan or might be soon implementable, please speak up.
I would say signage. I don't see why we can't put a few more Weaverville Community Forest signs up in places where they will signal to folks that they're in the community forest. And that's been kind of a tough thing to do on the Forest Service side. And I think we're about to put one in on Highway 3. And I think there might be 1 or 2 other places in the basin where we could do that. And that may be low hanging fruit now that the Forest Service is starting to kind of get into gear. Just a suggestion. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen. And probably even easier if we can put them on like county right of ways, so we don't have to do NEPA at the entrance of the forest. Awesome. Any other ideas?
I've got a couple of thoughts. The former extension agent did a project in Oak Woodland on the BLM side, and putting in some plots, did thinning, prescribed burning on some of them, and had some controls. So that would be good for the extension forester to follow up on. And something that I've seen in different places that I've been is interpretive signs along trails. We've got this great trail system, and we've done a lot of management. There's been a lot of things that have happened along these trails, and if there could be some funding to set up signs at different places to kind of describe what's been going on, I think it would really enhance the recreation experience of the trail users. And educate them about the forest and the landscapes that they are traveling through.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Kenneth. People might be happy to hear, since signs are getting brought up, that we actually just installed some signage on the Trinity Children's Forest area, which I think is back near the high school. That's been sitting in NEPA for like 2 or 3 years, and we just put those signs in this week. So, woo.
This is Rick. Just to respond to Kenneth real quick. I did actually manage to get a hold of Ryan DeSantis, and we spoke a little bit about that project. He has retained the samples here. From the preliminary analysis he did, he wasn't able to do much from a fire history standpoint, just because he was really challenged with finding burn scars. But I know you're a lot more familiar with that area and that project. So if you have any thoughts, please feel free to reach out and contact me directly. Thanks, Kenneth.
Okie dokie.
Okay. Anyone else on?
I just wanted to add, I think nothing much easier than trying to get people out there, once COVID kind of stuff settles down. So I think, continue to work with the education side of the RCD for field trips and things like that. I mean, low cost or no cost. And it raises the awareness about the community forest. And frankly, just more little things in the Trendy Journal.
Just like features about projects.
Yeah, things that are going on, things that are going to be going on, featuring some historic, kind of a little bit about some historic feature in, that's in the community forest, or natural feature that's, worth letting people know about.
Like highlighting
Yeah.
trail recommendations.
And with the journal, pretty much you write it, they print it.
Colleen again, Pat, thanks so much for that. Of course, that is really an easy, talk about low hanging fruit, very easy to do, and just sort of be consistent about it, so that we are actually, I hate to use this word, but branding our community forest. It's something we talked about a really long time ago. We called it marketing back then, but I think it's a great way to get the community forest in the public's face, if you will, through the paper and in a consistent way, so that it just becomes part of what everybody sees and maybe talks about. So kudos, that's a great idea. And if you want me to help with that or work with you on that, I would love to do that. Thank you, because you already do the conservation corner, so I know you're very gifted with the writing.
Yeah, though I can, I could make a concerted effort to maybe once every 3 or 4 nature corner things, focus something on the community forest.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. And Ricky brought up, this is definitely something that can go in the, oh, this was in the chat. Definitely something that can go in the strategic plan under our education and outreach area, is just keeping a schedule of, advertising events and kind of just educating people about the history and the nature and the culture and anything at the community forest. I think that's a great idea.
I think
Yeah,
more low-hanging fruit in this regard would be to work with the schools, maybe science classes, English classes, to get school children involved in writing or investigating some aspect of the community forest. Maybe writing school papers, or having a contest, or doing some investigative project, scientific project out in the woods.
You'd have a community forest science fair.
There you go.
Yeah, I really like the idea of getting the schools and the Shasta College campus involved in the community forest.
Alan, did you have a comment earlier?
Did we lose him? Well, maybe we'll hear back from Alan later. But Charlie just asked in the chat if we have a community forest Facebook page, and we do not. This is something we've talked about a little bit, especially recently. And I think it's kind of been the consensus that having a community forest Facebook page alongside the RCD Facebook page and other social medias would be a little bit segregating. And then, you have to, it takes time to build up a following on a new Facebook page. So I think we've kind of decided, at least for now, to keep community forest advertising and social media within the RCD Facebook page. Okay. So I think we can go ahead and get into the nitty-gritty of the meeting. I'll pull up our Google document. And I'd like to reemphasize kind of what Ozzy mentioned earlier. Absolutely none of this is written in stone. Everything is editable. We're always open for suggestions on anything and everything. So if you just think it all looks like crap, then we'd love to hear from you. And if you think it all looks beautiful, then we want to hear that too. And this is, by no means finished. It's going to be a work in progress for many weeks. Yeah, so I think, at least to start, is there anything from what people read through, you just have a burning topic you want to talk about? Or any questions?
Yeah, Colleen here. So I went through quite a bit of it this morning and added some comments. To me, it's like I think we're getting a little too detailed in the kind of information we're presenting. Like, for instance, you mentioned total maximum daily loads, or TMDLs, which is the water quality standard, and among other things, like getting down to specifics of the kinds of plants that are there, or the way the water, quantity and quality in the basin, etc. And it just started to seem like an environmental document to me instead of a strategic document. I don't know if we really need to go into that kind of detail. All that's provided, as I said in my comments, in federal standards and practices for any kind of environmental document or work done on federal lands. So I think maybe we could not make it so data heavy and focus more on the strategy, which is another word for the direction we want to go in. So those were my thoughts.
This is Keith, if I could chime in on that. I just think that I'm noticing it depends upon your background, what you interpret. Let's just take a restoration. I was just on a call earlier this morning about forest restoration, and restoration means something different to a lot of different people. And if we don't have some metric for something like forest fire resiliency or water quality resiliency, and we don't have a baseline or we don't have a metric to measure it, somebody might think everything's fine and it's really not, and it might not, match the objectives of someone else. So somewhere along the line, we have to develop a clear understanding of what our target is, and then people can propose projects and prioritize projects as to how they meet those. You develop a matrix, and then you'll have, okay, this one in particular provides some, your flame length will be less under, the percentile of conditions, but it also provides benefit to water quality or other types of things. So if you don't have a metric, it makes it difficult. And maybe that's something we just do on an annual plan basis and not a strategic plan basis, but somewhere we need to get to that. Otherwise, someone just says, I want a healthy forest, and somebody sees a mushroom and they think that's good, and someone else sees one and they think it's a conch.
Yeah, thank you, Colleen and Keith, for your opinions. I think this was a big question that Kathleen and I kept coming back to as we were writing. You kind of pull one thread and you're like, okay, we want resilient forest, so what does that mean? And then we ended up kind of going deeper and deeper into the details to try to really pin down what we meant by that. So I appreciate both of your perspectives, and I just want to thank you and say this was definitely an issue where we were wondering how other people would approach this, what level of specificity seems useful or not to other people. So if anybody has more comments on that, we would love to hear more people's input on that.
This is Rick. I would second Keith's comments. I do agree with him that establishing some sort of common baseline is really important. I have to be honest, I haven't had a chance to go through the strategic plan yet, but if there is too much detail, we could always go into an appendix. One thing that I think is important to consider, especially given kind of where we are in this process, we don't always have support and funding to develop the more detailed environmental review plans. So if we can lay some of the groundwork here now with the strategic plan, it'll just make things easier down the line as we work on individual projects. So I think it is worthwhile just to try to grab as much of that information now that we have the resources and the experts here in the room.
I agree. We also had a situation, Kathleen, this morning. They were talking about from an erosion standpoint, someone had concerns, and so there was a proposal to do some tilling or ripping of some areas that had disturbance or had a potential for erosion post-fire, but if it contradicts or conflicts with another resource that needs protection, like for example archaeology, then you have to be able to know that there is a conflict there so that you can decide where and if or how to implement something like that. What might be good to one person isn't good to the other.
Yeah, definitely. All right, anyone else want to have anything to say on the topic of specificity? Okay, and I'll say too, I think to complement what Azalee was saying, I think we've kind of been trying to think about providing guidance for project creation in the future and project design. So we want to refrain from being so specific that we are designing projects, but also not be so general that, like what Keith was saying, we'll just say, you know, the project must create a healthy forest, and then that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways that that maybe the steering committee wouldn't even end up liking. So I think we're trying to hit that sweet spot in the middle, and so we're not, you know, as Colleen mentioned, we're trying not to necessarily be an environmental document. You know, this isn't any sort of programmatic EIR or anything like that. But I think the goal is to sort of provide guidance to future project design and project ideas.
So to sort of resolve this, because this is something that we were talking about a lot as kind of needing to be resolved before we continue, because we don't want to put a bunch of detail and then in the end, everyone's like, well, that wasn't useful, or vice versa. So, so if this hasn't been clear to anybody who's been looking at the document, the way it's organized is we go through our 3 objectives, which are forest management, education, and recreation, you know, broadly speaking. And then for each objective, so today we're talking about the forest management one. So for that objective, we first go through all of the constituent parts of that objective. Like we want a resilient watershed, we want a resilient forest, we want botanical diversity, whatever it is that makes up that objective. First, we go through and just define all that and describe it all. So that's a little bit more of maybe, Colleen, what you're referring to is like the direction that we're headed in. That's where we kind of describe that. And then we break off, still within that first objective umbrella, we break off into describing actions, but we're using the word action. So it's basically like a type of project. And that's where we get more specific. And that is where you probably saw the TMDL and all that stuff, Colleen. So there we're trying to be more specific. And Ricky's idea of putting that in appendix, I wonder if maybe that is a good compromise where only the objectives are in the strategic plan. Maybe that, if that feels more right and more like a strategic plan, and then the appendix is where we get into those details that Keith and Ricky point out are important for being able to plan. I don't know, just a thought for a compromise there so that we can kind of have both without derailing ourselves. If anyone has input on that.
This is Keith. I think where you put them right now makes it easy for us to evaluate without jumping to an appendix, but maybe we can pull them out and put them in an appendix as you suggested later. I'm reading the document now on your desired stand structure under forest management. Without the level of specificity that you put in yellow there, I wouldn't understand what I understand so much better after reading what you put, where I could say, okay, now I know what you want. So now I know how to get there. Without that, I don't know if, you know, what people are thinking with regards to the trade-offs between late soil development and fire resilient fuel break. So I think that has to be there somewhere, or at least specified somewhere.
This is Colleen. Yeah, good comments, Keith. Thank you. I think appendix can be okay. I'm afraid this thing's going to get bogged down. We do have an annual operating plan, and we are supposed to develop one every year. I'm not sure we're doing it this year because it's, you know, such a strange year. But that's a way of implementing projects, implementing the matrix that we're probably going to create here. And that's a year by year shot, but we do look at out years because some of these things take more than 1 year. So that might be a place where the implementation measures or the projects that come out of this can go. But I like the idea of the intermediate step of the matrix. And finally, along Keith's comments, I think it's important to define certain words because otherwise they don't really mean anything. And I think that's a fairly easy thing to do in this document without getting into a whole lot of gobbledygook about it. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Yes, I would also mention that, you know, if you talk about what your goal is, if it's to achieve a certain percentage or a high level of late cereal component and you're starting with a fire, you know, I think you might have just small trees and brush to start with, but if you know where you're going, you can figure out how to get there. And again, that needs to be clear to me. And I think whether it's mapped, I think that would be helpful. But if we know the goals or the objectives in the strategic plan, then we know how to get there. And then people could throw projects at it. Maybe someone has a pet project. Maybe they've got a piece of machinery they think can help us out and they want to try it out. We could throw it at the project. It doesn't even have to be a big one, but it helps to meet the overall plan.
Keith, could you just say the first part of that again, if you can remember? You said.
I only remember the last thing I said. But, I just think if we know that we want a late cereal forest and we're starting out with a post-fire condition with brush and 6 foot tall ponderosa pine that someone planted that maybe too dense of a density, but we want it to be late cereal, how do we get there?
I got you. Thank you. Great. I think what the strategic plan could do then would be to say we or the community forest, however you started out, you say we want to achieve these kinds of conditions and that, you know, that's, you know, let's say we've defined a healthy forest. So, and it's not a bunch of wishy-washy words, it's actually defined. And one of them would be like that, like we want to reach late cereal conditions. And so we could say that that was a goal or an objective. And then projects can fall out of that. What I guess the first step would be, we could list some steps like identify those areas, you know, assess stand quality, and then all that follows from there. And that would take care of that. You'd have the goal and the objective, actually a pathway to it. And then in the annual operating plan or the matrix or however that looks, then those areas are identified. And when money comes available or whatever, we can move and do it. Does that sound like kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, except I would say that spatially you need to know as well. If, let's just say, for example, I want, you know, historically we had 60% of the forest in this area was late cereal. Okay, we put houses in there. Now we're down to 40%. We've had some fires that have brought us down to 35. You know, we could say, okay, maybe it's all fragmented or it's all lumped and we want to distribute it more. So maybe a percentage isn't the only way to look at the metric of late cereal. Maybe we want to have that more widely distributed across, you know, maybe even a more prehistoric condition. So I think, you know, let's find out what we have and then let's talk about what we want to get. And then let's talk about where the best places are to achieve it. Because if we only have late cereal in one corner, for example, how are we going to maintain that might become a very high priority from a fire protection standpoint.
Yeah, gotcha. We're on the same page. Thanks. You just said it better.
Yeah, and I think for Kathleen and I, in the current design of the document, the way we're thinking about that chain that you both are describing, Colleen and Keith, is we've got the objectives, we have these descriptions of actions, which may be a confusing word, but we just mean types of projects and kind of the standards and guidelines that would go into designing a harvest or a thin or a stream restoration project. And those give us the guidelines, and then we prioritize which actions are most important. And all that happens in the strategic plan. But then it's not until the annual operating plan or when we're actually sitting down writing a grant proposal or when we're getting to the point of actually implementing something, that's when we're designing projects and the actual way we're going to implement. So it funnels from objective to action to priorities to implementing a project. That's kind of how we're thinking about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great, Osley. That's great. Thanks.
All right, Cindy, you want to chime in? I know you've been raising your hand.
Sorry, I didn't want to speak because I'm new and, you know, I didn't know, but I would like to say that if the tribe has a vision, and we have a couple projects in mind, and one of them is an interpretive walking trail. and that would be available to the community where they could walk or bike or whatever rules you guys or whoever would make. Maybe along Dutch Creek or anywhere. But there's a lot of grants out there we're finding, and unfortunately, we are such a small operation, and if you guys can collaborate, if there's someone in the group that knows how to, write grants or anything like that, that's just one project. Another one would be a Wintu village where the trees would be all native trees and the shrubs and, just all the cultural stuff. So we have a lot of ideas. We would be more than happy to apply for grants and just work with you guys on any big or small project and just help preserve the community, as you know that part of it. But we are definitely willing to help and go from there. That's pretty much all I wanted to say.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cindy. I really like both of those ideas. Those sound like really engaging, fun, ways to educate the community, and make sure we're acknowledging and making space for tribal history and all that awesome stuff.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, please email me or Kathleen if you are, like you said, finding these grant opportunities that you're interested in us collaborating with you on. I'm definitely all ears, and I think our education and outreach folks are, I'm sure, also would be really, really happy to work with you on that. So please reach out to us. We're happy to work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like 3 people that work on the tribal stuff. And so there's some of us that we're just overwhelmed. And so we're hitting and missing, but we're really, really interested in this project. So we're going to sit in on the meetings, whether it's Sunny or I, and we're going to work with everyone. We're excited.
Awesome. We are too. And it sounds like, yeah, if you guys already have like specific project ideas like that and potential grants, like maybe we should all just get on the phone or the proverbial table sometime in the near future and see what all we can do and which of those things we can put into the strategic plan.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. I guess we were still just kind of on if anyone had any other burning questions or thoughts from looking at the draft, but if we've addressed all of those, we can just start kind of going through from top to bottom and talking about things that Ozzy and I want to.
I would like, Kathleen, I'd like to say that I just noticed about 5 minutes before the meeting that there was such a draft. I hadn't seen it and I hadn't opened it. So I will definitely look it over and I will make comments and provide those to you at some future date.
Awesome. Thank you, Kenneth. And yeah, if you haven't had a chance to look at it yet, or you haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, or whatever it may be, this is not the one and only opportunity to discuss. Please feel free to comment and things in there virtually or reach out to us and we can talk about it. I guess I meant to do this a few minutes ago, but can everybody still see my Google document screen? Okay. I just wanted to kind of show people around the interface a little bit. So I have the settings set so that anyone at all with the link can comment or do what Google Documents calls suggest, which is basically just writing, editing whatever you want in there, but it shows Ozzy and I like a little call out bubble that says, Pat wrote in this or Kelly suggested this. And then we just either like approve or edit or whatever it may be. I think we've just been approving a lot of stuff so that it doesn't get too confusing. But so you can do that by anytime this kind of bubble comes up over here, it says add a comment or suggest edits. So clicking either one of those, let's say entering suggesting mode, and you can just type in whatever it is you have to say, or if it's something more of a question about that subject matter, not a direct edit, you can do it in the form of a comment bubble. So you can do that in a couple of ways. It'll show up if you hover kind of over the edge of the document here, or you can right click and it'll say comment. For me, it says editing since I'm the owner of the document. But so that's how you can kind of interface with the Google document. On the left side of your screen, there should also be an outline of what Google interprets as kind of the headings. And so you can collapse and open that with these little buttons. Quick navigation intro. Okay, so I think
Do you have to have this open online, or can you do this after you downloaded the document?
on Google, you can actually work offline. I forget exactly how to do that setting. But you can set it to where it's offline, just like a regular Word document. And then when you go back into online mode, it'll just integrate all of your changes or all of your suggestions.
But if you download the document, if you download it like as a PDF or as a Word doc, you have the options under File Download to download as either a PDF or a Word doc. And if you do that, it won't show us. You'll have to then send us that document separately so that we can incorporate your comments, which is totally fine. If that's the easiest way for anybody to interface, that's totally fine. Just email it to Kathleen or I, and we'll get your comments in there. But it won't, if you download it, it will not automatically show up online.
Yeah, and I just realized while I was in that area that I had to turn on this feature to make available offline. So now you all should be able to interact with the document offline as well. Okay. And I know
just let us know if you're having any technical issues with the document. We can troubleshoot on a case-by-case basis as well.
Yeah. Sometimes virtual collaboration does get sticky, so we're here to troubleshoot. Okay. So I guess the best way to do this is just kind of to run through, and Azalee and I can pose to the group any questions or trouble areas we've been having. And if anybody sees anything or thinks of anything along the way, please feel free to interrupt. Okay, so this is our first objective that we're talking about this month. Is kind of the first half of our forest management sub-objectives. So first of those sub-objectives is these disturbance and forest resilience related topics, specifically wildfire, drought, insects, and disease. So we've kind of defined vaguely what we're calling forest resilience, talking about why we need forest resilience in the community forest, what that would look like. Chat box. What that would look like in general, which is vision of success, and then metrics of success, what that completed vision would actually look like. So one of the first things we have, anything generally that we've highlighted is things that we have questions about or want to discuss with the group. So our first highlight here, we were talking about whether there needed to be or whether it was feasible to have standards for trying to keep pests and diseases out of the community forest. like cleaning work trucks or just encouraging people to take seeds and stuff out of your socks, out of your dog. Is that something that we think needs to be in here, or is that discussable?
It's Colleen. Sorry, I'm cutting somebody off. So I don't know if that really fits into a resilient forest. I think that the standard sentence is a subset of what you're trying to say, which is probably something like reducing or eliminating infestations of non-native species or something like that. I think that standard one is real specific, and I think the other ones are more general.
As our fire model outputs, I'm not sure how this is to me like one of these spots where the level of specificity there is probably a little bit more than is necessary for the document. I'm not sure how to, but I don't have a good suggestion as far as like how do you, like if you're going to try and document metrics of the success for each of these different sort of sub objectives, I'm not sure how to.
Yeah,
what else
Kelly,
goes there?
This is Rick, and I totally agree with you on that. I mean, with fire models and carbon modeling, I mean, you could move the decimal point one place or another and come up with a completely different answer. They're just really difficult benchmarks to use, and I kind of see this section more as descriptive of what a forest that is resilient to wildfire might look like. Maybe one way would just be to pick one or two metrics that can be used to measure a forest's resilience to wildfire, but definitely not the full list that's there, even though they can be used to indicate those health metrics.
Yeah, so to clarify, for each sub-objective within this forest management objective, we broke it into first any definitions that were needed, then purpose, like a vision, and metrics. So purpose and vision are pretty general, and we were hoping those would be the starting points of conversation that we could all definitely get behind and agree on. Like, we know why it's important, that's the purpose, and we know generally what we want it to look like, how it will like feel in our hearts, and that's like the vision part. And then metrics is where we were thinking like to try to actually get more into like, okay, but how do we know if we got there? And this is taking something that's more just a general vision and being like, how can we tell? And I think right now there are a lot of like laundry list metrics, and I don't think we need to include all the metrics we have listed out. It was more brainstorming, and that's exactly why we're asking you guys, like, which ones are the ones we should pull out and focus on. And I think it is my thinking behind why it's important to have metrics is because they were looking for grant funding and trying to write in a proposal of why this project is important. If we're able to say like we strategized and we knew that it was important that we improve wildfire resilience, and we'll be able to show whether or not we have in this way through this project, I think that makes a much more compelling argument for someone to fund us. And so, but what I'm hearing is a couple different things, but one of the threads I'm hearing from Kelly and Colleen is like potentially that there shouldn't even be a metric section, that each of these sub-objectives should just have purpose and vision rather than, and not even try to include metrics. Is that a correct interpretation of what I'm hearing?
Well, Oz, this is Rick. You know, the way you described it actually makes more sense than what I was thinking, and thanks for clarifying that. One thought I had was, you know, what does the Forest Service and BLM use? You know, what sort of metrics do they have that the community forest can rely on to assess whether or not these objectives are being met, instead of the Trinity County RCD being forced to go out and develop it and assess it on their own every few years.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Ricky. Something Osley and I have been talking about recently, especially, because the community forest does lie within kind of the agency of the BLM and the Forest Service. And obviously we need to be thinking about like the county general plan and lots of other relevant documents. We've been talking about, in the case that a metric or a requirement or something is addressed in another document, we just say, reference that other document. So we're not repeating and reinventing the wheel, and using the strategic plan as kind of a narrowing opportunity to say like, okay, here's what the requirements are on Forest Service, here's what the requirements are for BLM, here's maybe one step more unique to the community forest area that we'd like to meet as well. Or if it's just on the same plane, then we can just say we're meeting this Forest Service requirement or standard.
Yeah, and Ricky, I think your question is a really good one, and that's where if anyone from either of the agencies is on the call still, which I'm not looking at the participants list, but they might not be. That's where I'm getting a no from Kelly. But yeah, good question, Ricky. We really want to know those things, and unfortunately, a lot of it is not included in plans that we can reference. Like the BLM RMP is, as Jennifer was telling us in the last meeting, is quite old. Same goes for the Shasta Trinity National Forest LRMP, and Kathleen and I have looked at those, and they're very general. So there isn't really any information that we've found so far that lays out, oh, this is how we do our assessment every year, every 2 years, and here's the metrics we use. So we need to get more of that information, because I think you're right that that's the best starting place for figuring out what our outputs are or what our metrics are. And then I will say,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if there aren't regionally specific ones, I mean, they're not great, but the perhaps CAL FIRE's FRAP assessments do provide some level of benchmarking on wildfire risk, and those could be a metric. They're not as refined as these, but and I'm not sure if Kenneth has anything from SPI when they use to assess the conditions of their land, if there's something that would work, because any assessment that borders the community forest, I would imagine, has relevance.
So this is Keith with SPI. I would just offer that as you describe them, Osley, that these means of measuring, I think we need to have some metrics wherever we put them. We need to be able to reference them. And I think I maybe pushed a little hard on this before, was that if, for example, we want to keep the introduction of invasive weeds down, okay, yeah, you can state that as a goal, but how are you going to do that? Is it going to be through, horseback introduction? There's ways that the Forest Service has to implement and maintain that from being a problem, say in the wilderness areas where they don't want that introduction, or maybe you already have Scotch broom up on the hill in a fire area. How do you want to keep that from getting spread? And some of that's going to be equipment hygiene, because I've seen where it's not done, you can have some very rapid spreading. And if you have some populations that are isolated, then we have a strategy for getting those isolated populations taken care of so that you don't have this joining of the larger population. So, it's just identifying some strategies and identifying some metrics, whether it's a laundry list that you don't have to do a fire modeling exercise on every stand out there, but you can at least do one or two and see if you're, doing the right thing. If you're going to have, 95 percentile weather conditions, what's your potential for success of the forest still standing there? I mean, you're always going to have crazy weather, and it's going to fail your greatest attempts by man to harness nature. But I do think having some metrics is important to me at some level to be able to measure our success.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with the fire model outputs, I don't think it has to be too time consuming. Like I've already run a model like that just under standard are sort of like normal summer conditions. And then even if it would be probably preferable to use like a 90th percentile weather condition, but whatever your baseline is, if you keep those inputs the same and then just run it with and without your treatment, I think that's like probably one of the most direct ways to actually know whether you're increasing the chance of it surviving a wildfire. Because it's just like very direct. So that's part of why we put that in there. But yeah, thanks.
And Pat brought up in the chat, has a more fundamental question. Are all 9 of these sub-objectives about forest resilience? So I think that's at least what we think for right now. That's why we put them all there. But maybe Pat, if you have a different idea, I think we were thinking, forest resilience to disturbance.
Well, certainly the one that jumped out at me that I think will recur in every objective is long-term consistent funding. I don't know that that's a forest resilience kind of sub-objective. It's a much broader issue, and sustainable funding is probably a bigger objective or goal. It doesn't really fit under forest resilience in my mind.
Yeah, so sorry, did I interrupt you?
And then I think I understand why you put watershed resilience. I don't know that I would use resilience, but to me, it's almost a bigger issue that may be its own major objective, not a sub-objective of forest health.
Yeah, so so the umbrella of objective 1 is responsible forest management. So maybe it's clear in my head and not in other people's heads. But to me, responsible forest management involves financial management. So managing the forest for resilience, but also water, also soil, also to make sure that it can fund itself. And then that's kind of how I was thinking of it.
Okay.
And then we also, at the end, I agree that it is a bigger issue and it probably applies to all of the objectives, including education and recreation. So at the end, there is also a separate section regarding funding. So maybe it is redundant to put it in there, and then we can totally move it around. That's just a little view into my head and why I put it there originally.
So maybe it would help. So right above that objective 1, which I guess I missed, ecologically social, where you have introduction to objectives, and you have forest management, education, demonstration, recreation, and cultural use. Maybe you should use the same term there that you use to describe objective 1. Does that make sense?
You're on mute, Lily.
Is this what you mean? What this change that I just made, Pat, is just using the same term? Can you see what I just did here?
Well, yeah, either that, yeah, that probably the two here in the two places they need to match, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
But I would still take out the funding as a sub-objective, because I think that somehow that's just its own thing.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Thank you, and I'm sorry for the confusion I had.
No, that's okay. I mean, that's why we're all here, to talk through it. Maybe in that case, funding just becomes a 4th objective. If we're already going to be talking about it at length, kind of at the end of the document.
Can I just say to the funding issue, this is key. If we want to, I mean, the only way you get things done is with some sort of funding, typically, or volunteerism, which is fine as well. But that just goes to which projects get implemented. So you could have a great idea, but it just has no funding source. So I think having a funding source allows us to not have to go to Congress to ask for money, and or the county or whoever else. So I do like knowing, at least project by project, we need to know if there's matching funds available or just some rich philanthropist that I haven't met yet who wants to fund the Weaverville Community Forest.
Yeah, and that is a challenge with the community forest, because and that's part of, I think we'll get into that a lot more when we talk more about not only prioritization of projects, which I think has to take into account which projects make money and which projects cost money, but also the funding plan, because there is a struggle with the consistency of funding, and that's why retained receipts are so special, because we have theoretically at least have a little more control over that financial flow, whereas grant funding and in a lot of cases even the federal dollars are variable, and we can't always know whether one year to the next we're going to have funding for a particular cause. So, but yeah, thank you for bringing that up, and I think we need to dive into that a lot more and face that as a group and figure out how to move forward under those circumstances.
I believe the theme for our March meeting is funding, so stay tuned. Okay, we are getting close to 2:30 somehow already, so I think let's all try, not that we've been going slow or talking about anything extraneous. I think everything's been important and helpful so far, but let's keep rolling. Any other thoughts or discussion topics on sub-objective A, forest resilience to these various disturbances?
Just to wrap up our conversation about the metrics, if anybody has any strong feelings about, I think we've discussed like whether or not they should be included and maybe the benefit of them, and maybe a compromise is we need, which is something that I definitely agree with, is like we need to simplify the metrics. So what would be really helpful from you all, if you haven't already, or if you get the chance to dig into the document, is to highlight certain metrics that you're like, this one isn't useful, this one is useful, and here's why, or this is, and because we haven't even really fleshed out any of the metrics, like you see right now, it just says fire model output, but of course that'll need a little more explanation as to what we mean by that. But we didn't want to do that until we've gotten that list refined first. So if you want to dive in and say, and put in your 2 cents about which metrics you think should go or should stay, that would be a really helpful place to start engaging with the document. If you can, we appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a note to that point right now.
So this is Keith. I did have a question. I'm looking at the vision of success under resilient Weaverville Community Forest as a forest with heterogeneous structure and diverse composition. In mature stands, trees are widely spaced on average. And I guess I don't know that has to apply to every stand. Sometimes, especially with some species, they grow up in an even age condition. And so you've got a very dense canopy, which will carry a crown fire real well. But if you don't have the sustaining, if you've got some protection to where the fire stays on the ground, it doesn't get into the crown itself. So, I mean, we have conditions in the summer where the heat has to escape somewhere. And if there's a lot of fuel on the ground, it'll just go up through it. But I just, maybe we can look at, and maybe I'm getting into the micromanagement, but stand by stand, some of them can be dense, some can be widely spaced, but I don't think we want to imagine that they're all are created the same or needing the same type of elements to be successful and resilient. So I don't know. I'm not sure what to say there, except that widely spaced seems to fit the oldest trees, maybe the very large older trees, and then you've got the trees in between that might be 100 years old, and the ones that are 200 and 300, you actually need to give them enough space so that they can keep going for another 100 years or so. But so I don't know, different species and I saw a stand out there on the August complex where we had a 72-inch ponderosa pine. I didn't believe it, but I had to measure it. But it was surrounded by 100-year-old Douglas fir that was completely very dense, very nice stand, but when it burned up, the heat from that Douglas fir burned up the big pine too. So if we had given that pine some space, he would have been fine, or given the Doug fir some breakup in its stand structure so it's not 1,000 acres of all the same size. Each tree doesn't have to be spaced out, but maybe the stand can be protected in a way. So maybe just understand that not all resilient forests are widely spaced. That, I don't know if that helps or not.
This
We're
is
just
Colleen. It does say in mature stands, trees are widely spaced on average. So it's not across the board. Is that a distinction without a difference or not?
You know, I guess this comes down to what's mature too. So some people will say 70-year-old stand is mature from a timber standpoint, but 100 years for 125 maybe for maximum productivity, and then maybe you go to mature from a cereal standpoint. It might be for one species it's 200 and another it's 300, and redwood it's 1,000. So it maybe let's try and protect the oldest trees, protect the biggest, protect the elements that we're looking for, the components of the stand that we're looking for. I've seen where the Forest Service has projects where they'll cut everything within 30 feet of a large old growth tree, and then we can all agree upon that type of tree. And then the other stands get treated a little bit different. Parts of the stand get treated different. So I guess I don't know what a mature forest looks like, and I'm confessing that as a forester.
So
Yeah, and this is where
I'd like to add a little wrinkle to that too. During the Megram fire, I went out and looked at burned area out in Horse Lindell Creek. There was a plantation there with widely spaced, very large, mature conifers that were left as seed trees, and every one of them was killed by that fire. So that's just a wrinkle.
Right, and that's why I was asking earlier today about the intensity. So you can have intense fire that burns up the whole vegetation, but then you have a fire intensity on the ground that burns everything on the ground, which maybe doesn't show up in the vegetation intensity, but you've essentially killed the stand by cooking the root systems and the cambium. So, you know, that overall footprint might be somewhat larger. So yeah, there's conditions that we're just going to be, you know, ducking and dodging. I would look at the fire map from the August complex as well and say, during certain times of the fire, some parts of it burned hotter than others. And maybe I'm spending most of my time up north where the intensity was pretty severe and impactful on many acres. But I think if we can look at those patterns, it'll give us a clue as to under what conditions we can have fire and have it not be devastating.
Yeah, I think I will say, oh, go ahead.
Well, I think the idea is to maintain conditions where you have large trees that are more resistant to being killed because of the height of the base of the crowns above the ground and the thickness of the bark on the trees, and you don't have surface fuels that are such that will act as fire ladders or create such an intense fire that it'll kill the cambium or the roots at the base of the tree.
Yeah, thank you both. I would say, like I described, this is the beginning of the funnel, so we were trying to be pretty vague, which is why we have some of the issues of like, what's a mature stand, what's this? So both of you specifically are people who have expertise or strong opinions about this. If you go to the action section and look at and help us fill out some of those details of specifically what does it mean to treat and encourage resilience, that would be extremely helpful for us. So thank you for already starting to do that. And then the other thing is I wanted to bring out that this isn't just wildfire resilience, so it's also for drought, insects, and disease. And that's part of why I originally put in the wide spacing on average. And of course, I think heterogeneity is important, but wide spacing on average frees up more growing space for each individual tree, which in general increases the vigor and their ability to ward off insect disease and the effects of drought. So it's not just wildfire.
Good, good. So that clarifies it for me, is that, widely spaced or appropriately spaced, and each stand, the way they work is that I've seen is they grow up to a level of threshold, and then something brings them back to a level that they can handle, whether it's insects, so a density issue. You might start out with 1,000 trees per acre. You're not going to make 1,000 trees per acre at a mature level. So something's going to knock them down. It's either going to be fire or bugs or wind or something. So yeah, if we can manage that, let's be a positive effect, influence.
Awesome. Okay. Do you think, is that kind of the wrap up potentially that you were looking for, Audley? Should we hop to the next one? All right. Thank you to our anonymous coyote here, whoever that happens to be. All right, so next we were talking about aesthetics. So I think as Colleen brought up in the chat, part of the original kind of spur of the community forest was to maintain view sheds around Weaverville. So we thought it was important to add this in. So we've kind of defined purpose, which is similar to the original intent. Vision of success, namely being that there will be no clear cuts in the community forest. And kind of metrics of success, this is a lot less quantitative, obviously, than forest resilience per se, or the various forestry metrics that we have to complete those types of goals. So we've just said, preserve view sheds from various key locations in town, keeping tree lines and ridge tops intact, visible, clean views of waterways and that kind of thing. We were trying to think about if there were any officially designated scenic routes in the area, but as far as I can tell, there are not. But I do know that Highway 3 and Route 299 are both Forest Service scenic byways. So I was wondering if anyone on the call knew if that came with any requirements for like management on roadsides or anything like that. But I think that's the only specific thing we had for aesthetics.
I will say that I like Ricky's change there. I think beauty is a very subjective term, and where it says metrics of success, a beautiful forest is evidenced by the aesthetic quality, I think it's a better way to, I think it's just a better way to describe what it is that we're trying to improve is a quality that's less subjective, because everybody's going to have a different idea of what a beautiful forest looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, Colleen here. Yeah, I have a issue with describing a beautiful landscape. Again, very subjective. A beautiful landscape to some people is a clear cut, frankly. So I think we should just try to find another word for that.
Yeah.
I do like how you've identified the interruptions caused by management activities, because I could look at a stand from a distance and think it looks very aesthetically pleasing, but for some folks, if you get up close to it and you can see the man-caused interruptions, even if it's a stump. So, some people are offended by that, and I don't know how to get over that exactly. But I do think aesthetics or beauty is certainly in the eye of the beholder, but aesthetic quality for most folks is going to be from a distance, and then but maybe a higher level even than that when it comes to a trail, or whether it's a bike trail or a walking trail. Most people aren't even going to want to see stumps. So I don't know how to manage that, but you can't just let the forest. To me, going over Oregon Mountain, the pass there post fire, that's not very attractive to me at all, planted or unplanted. So I think we could probably agree on most of that.
Yep.
So maybe then we can now or in the future come up with metrics for like what project cleanup needs to entail. If that means, you know, removing stumps or replanting so that the landscape isn't bare. If people have ideas about more specifics potentially.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, slash cleanup for me on the working forest. You know, it's part of the biomass that's nutrient cycling, so it's important to me. But for someone else, if they see a severed limb or they see a Vexar tube on a tree, most people think they don't want to see man's hand. I don't know how to, again, do that without, except do it at night, I guess.
Well, I think the community forest is a working forest. It's not a natural forest in the way some people think of something untouched by humans. And so there's going to be evidence of man's hand in this and women's hand in the management of the forest. And I don't see anything wrong with that.
Well, I don't either, Kenneth. I would say, Kenneth, that Bob Morris took me on a little tour of his property, and he said well, he can tell you what he wanted to tell me, but that some people think he's given himself over to the dark side by cutting some, 2-inch and 3-inch and 4-inch whips on his property in the understory. And I think that's a little extreme. But if that's what a person feels, that they don't want to see man's involvement. So the evidence, I think, can be mitigated for most folks, but at least has to be taken under consideration.
Sure. Have you looked at the Shasta Trinity LRMP and the way they dealt with the visual quality? They have a whole system that they use to define that. Have you looked at that?
I've looked at the areas on the ground, but I haven't looked at it as far as documentation. Maybe that'd be helpful.
We looked at the LRMP. Yeah, we looked at the LRMP, didn't see that part, but we were looking because they divide it up into the different, they don't call it, it's not districts, but the different sort of like management areas. And I didn't see it, at least for our area, but maybe I wasn't looking the right part where they have like a more general description of how they deal with aesthetics. So I'll definitely look back. Thank you for the recommendation. I'm writing it down now.
This is Pat.
Something I found on my own property. I've had a lot of trees die, and I found through experience that limbs take a long time to deteriorate, whereas the bole of the trees, especially the pines, that happens fairly rapidly, even when they're out in the open. So since my land was a lot of it was hydraulic mined, I'm taking these trees and leaving the trunks to deteriorate and add to the productivity of the soil, long-term productivity.
Something I was thinking too, kind of as Keith was mentioning, some people might just not want to, be visually cognizant of management activities, just see the natural landscape. And maybe this is an opportunity for education and signage as well, to explain maybe why we've left a tree trunk to contribute, or why some equipment is present or something like that.
Kathleen, I'm glad you said that, because I was
Yes,
going to
I
say
think
this
so.
discussion, clearly we need to remember it when we get to the second objective, which is education and demonstration. Part of, I think, what's been a learning process in the community, has been to see activity back on the landscape, whether it's been the timber harvest, including the one we did attempting to do with horse logging, to prescribed fire, all that I think that needs to be, that's a strategic objective, is to teach people about working forests better.
Well,
Improve
and
the image of
Yeah,
fire.
and
sure, this is Keith. I wanted to say too that, following through on a project, I think is just as important. And you talked about this with cleanup projects, but I'll take, for example, going to my place on Highway 3 across from the Cal Fire Station. For safety, we've cut the snags and laid them on the ground. Whereas a tree that falls over and lays on the ground, I think like Kenneth was describing, is one that has the root wad still and it breaks down. That looks natural. We can't have too much of that. But when we cut it and then throw it all on the ground and leave it as the fuels are just way, way, way too heavy. And it looks like man did it and man didn't do a very good job.
And something that people need to understand and about this forest, that during the mining days, there was no forest in the Weaver Basin. It was all cut down. When we did the inventory for the PTEIR, all those trees were within 50 years of each other, and everything had been cut down. So you're not talking about a natural forest here. This is a forest that is a second growth forest. If you want to get into a natural landscape, go into the wilderness. We've got this huge wilderness right adjacent to the community forest. And if you go up there, you're going to see all sorts of areas that have been impacted by fire that look pretty ugly. If you think ugliness are dead trees that are standing and lying on the ground.
Yeah, and I think, with stumps like right along trails, the idea of potentially removing them like that, although that would be probably costly and difficult, it's possible. But I think there is a line where you have to be like, well, some management is going to be visible, because I think a lot about prescribed fire, and I've heard people say they think areas that have been burned are really ugly, which I disagree with. I think they're so beautiful, but some people think it's really ugly just to see burn scars on trees, and you can't remove that if you've done a prescribed burn in a place that's visible from a trail. So I think it is right to say there has to be a point where we turn toward education to try to encourage acceptance of management visually. So maybe that's something we'll try to work on, and you guys can help us on in the metrics section, or as we get down into the action sections, and especially when we get on maybe even to the recreation portion, is like helping to comment on exactly how we want to approach that.
I
want
to jump in here. It's Colleen, just to add a little historical perspective. When we first were presenting this idea of the community back in the late 90s, there were a lot of folks who and this was just the BLM side at that time, a lot of folks just wanted us to somehow acquire it, but please leave it alone, don't do anything to it. And then we had a fire in 2001, and it was a great educational tool. And now people were right on board with fire resiliency, fuels reduction, managing the forest. Basically, they now understood that active forest management was important. So I believe that the community all along has been buying in to all the activities on the forest, whether they're apparent or not. I'm not concerned with how it looks. Most people really are supportive of it. Sure, there's going to be people that are going to object to some of the aesthetics, but this is a working forest. This is a community forest, and I think most folks accept that. And if we start up more of an educational push, like through the paper and other avenues, we'll just continue to have more and more buy-in. So I'm not really concerned about whether it looks like this nice forest that's never been touched. Kenneth is right. You want to go have that experience, go into wilderness areas. That's not what the community forest is.
I'm going to take some of you to the Board of Forestry meeting with me next month, and we'll talk.
Right on,
So-
up there.
So I had a thought, Oz and Kathleen, and it's more of a social science kind of thing. But when you're talking about metrics for, view shed or beauty or whatever, I would imagine that there are outdoor places where they periodically survey the public as to the experience that they had. And I think the Arcata Community Forest might be someplace where they actually have little postcard survey things, probably now, some online, but that may be a way to measure how people are viewing the view shed. I don't know a lot about it, but it just seems to me, maybe Ricky through Cooperative Extension, maybe they have, kind of some survey folk that would have experience with that.
Well, and I think Alan had to jump off the call, but maybe that's something that Trinity Trail could help us with too, just kind of doing the community, like, how are we doing? Like, what's your favorite trail? What's the most beautiful spot in Weaverville, that kind of thing.
So one of
Yeah.
my associates, Mark Andre, manages the community forest. I'm sure he'd know about any surveys that are being done, and I can give you his address, his email address. But I know one of the harvests that they were doing, which are all thinning in the redwoods. Some people came down from Oregon and did a tree sit, and he tried to talk to these people about the kind of management, because the city is totally, the people in the city are totally in support of the management they're doing there. But some people from out of the area were all upset about cutting the redwoods. And anyway, they finally left a big trash mess under the tree sit.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing with regards to this, I'm talking to people who work for the city of Arcata and are involved with the community forest there. One interesting thing is they tend to have a staff person whenever they're actively doing harvesting, because obviously the active harvesting also, when the equipment is there, affects the aesthetics of the trail and or wherever people are recreating. And they said they will tend to have a staff person there who largely is interfacing with people who come up the trail and are like, what's going on here? You're cutting down trees? That's still allowed? Isn't that bad? And then that person will interface with them and give a little bit of background about the history of the forest and why it's increasing the forest health and all that. So that kind of thing could be an interesting way to get at this as well.
Maybe. Well, we are coming up on 3 o'clock. So I don't know, Osley and Kelly, do you guys want to keep going, or should we release people? I'm sure we can all talk about this all day long, but people have schedules and days.
Were there
Some of us already did another Zoom this morning. So
yeah.
I think it's time for Kelly to buy you guys your favorite beverage.
Yeah, I think I think out of respect for everyone's time, we'll leave it at that. But just the Google Doc is always there, and we're always available by email or phone. So please continue the conversation, maybe when you're not brain dead or another Zoom meeting or just got off another Zoom meeting. So thank you all again. Can't thank you enough for your time.
So when are we meeting next?
Oh, yes. So our next tentative date is January 8th, 2021. So that's about 5 weeks from today. In the coming weeks, we'll send out another doodle poll about timing of scheduling and things like that.
There is a Trinity County Collaborative Recreation Committee meeting from 10 to 12 that day that some of us will be on.
Yep.
Okay, good to know.
It might be good to just set a regular time of day, like 1 to 3 for the days that you choose for those, and rather than relying on like a level of consensus that you're probably not going to get anyways, and it's just making a level, making it a priority for people to, to have it as a set schedule.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my only comment at this point would be, is there any specific areas that you would like members of the committee to address or to focus on within the document now as it is? Because obviously there's some areas where you guys have clearly focused attention, and then others where there's kind of not a lot done yet. So, I mean, Kathleen, Osley, is there anything you would like people to sort of focus their attention on before the next meeting?
Yeah. Go ahead, Osley.
I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, at this point, anywhere is helpful. In the places that we've filled out more, so just that being said, whatever is of interest or whatever is your area of expertise, feel free to chime in there. With that being said, the areas where we've worked on more, we've tried to highlight in yellow things that we think we really felt like, well, we're just putting in what we think, but we have no idea if anyone agrees with us. So we kind of highlighted those areas. So please take a look at those, and we'll continue to highlight more. So check in. And then red is areas where we just also have a lot of questions. We put in things we really are just literally have a question mark next to them, like not sure how to define that or what it is or how to fix this. So red text and yellow highlighting are good places. Sometimes the red text is something that we just can't fix until the end. It's like how we're going to number the figures. So some of those aren't as useful, but definitely the yellow highlighting. And then also areas where we haven't included as much, we're obviously going to continue working to include more. So if you want to wait, it just depends on what workflow you prefer. If you want to chime in on those places where we haven't written much or anything, you can start putting things in. If you want to give us seeds and guide our direction, and if you prefer to wait, we'll fill those in, and then you can comment or track or try to do your track changes on those later. So it really depends on what you prefer, but I would say the main thing is that yellow highlighting. If you want like kind of easy things to just zoom to, you could start there.
Osley, does it make sense for us to kind of focus on the next sub-objective?
Yeah, so I was gonna say that too. So the topic of this meeting was supposed to be the first 4. We only got through the first 2. And the topic of the next meeting was going to be the remaining forest management sub-objectives. So as far as what we'll discuss at the next meeting, it'll still be focused on forest management, and hopefully we can at least touch on soil and water, which we didn't get to today. So that's what's going to be discussed immediately next. But like Osley said, if you just want to go ahead and suggest a whole paragraph or a whole section of text, like we'll take that. If you want to comment like good, bad, that's okay too. So feel free to work wherever you like and wherever you have thoughts. Yeah, does that answer those questions?
Well, this is kind of unrelated, but I wanted to get this out before we start losing people. Miller Bailey, I see that you're still on there. I have a question for you after this is all wrapped. If you could stay on for a couple of minutes, that'd be great.
And I'll just say too, as far as the scheduling stuff, the meetings are the first Friday of every month. We, for January, made it the second Friday just because the first Friday is New Year's Day. So a lot of people won't be at work or will just be on vacation. And I think as far as committing to a time of day, we would like to start having these meetings either in the evening or around the lunch hour, if that's doable and friendly to people, so that we can try to get more public participation as well. Not everybody can just attend during their day job. So maybe potentially having meetings at like starting at 5:30 or 6. So I think if we can poll people on that, maybe for the January meeting, and just see what people think and see what people's schedules are, then maybe after that meeting, we can just set the time and do it same time, same day every month. But yeah, I know some people are less available in the evening, so it's a tricky subject, but we want to make sure this is accessible to the larger public as well.
Thanks, everyone. I think we can wrap it up there.
Owsley and Kathleen, you're doing a great job.
Thank you, Kenneth. Thank you for being involved. Thank you for everybody still on the phone.
Colleen agrees.
Thank you, Colleen.
Helpful. I'll see you all next month.
All right. Thanks, Ricky.
Thanks, you guys, for all you do. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to your educational pieces that come in. It's going to be fun watching the community become more aware of what is so natural to all of you and really isn't to everybody else. I'm excited to see that. Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jill.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, thanks, Jill.
All right. I guess we can leave Kathleen. It sounds like Kelly and Miller might stick on here. So bye, everybody else.
I think if I leave, the meeting will close. So
I'm actually.
You might need to make Kelly.
You what, Kelly? Sorry.
I'm actually the host according to this list here.
Okay. I guess maybe if you're also on the RCD account, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I am.
Well,
That's no problem.
I will log out
Stop
then.
the recording.
Oh, yes.